planned ahead for you, where we will share information on our new offering, our early career research fellowships. And before we formally begin, I have a small request. Even though we are all meeting virtually, it's quite helpful to know who's in the room. So I request you to help start building a little community together by taking a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, tell us your name, where you're joining from, and maybe a quick note about what brought you here today for this webinar. Thank you. Paula, if you can move to the next slide. I'll also briefly share the agenda for the webinar. We have a packed webinar today. We'll start with opening remarks from Sorel and Liz, who I'll introduce shortly, followed by an overview of the intersections of research between violence against women and violence against children, followed by an overview of the fellowship program itself by colleagues from SVRI. I'm now going to hand over to Sorel to open the webinar. Sorel Lucas is an international program manager at the Kering Foundation, which is focused on building a world free from violence for women and children. Sorel looks after the foundation's partnerships in France, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Originally from the UK, Sorel is based in Paris, France, along with the rest of the foundation's team. Thank you so much, Sorel, for supporting this work and for being here today to share Kering Foundation's vision for this overall program. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Sangeeta. So I'm so pleased to be here and to see so many of you here too, so welcome. Quick introduction to the Kering Foundation, so you know who we are and where we're coming from. We were established in 2008 in order to combat gender-based violence. And Kering is a global luxury group based here in Paris. We have a majority of our clients and our employees who are women. And so the group really wanted to focus on an issue that concerns so many women worldwide. And then in 2023, when we reviewed our strategy, we decided to extend that remit to also addressing violence against children. And that came after hearing from our partners on the ground about the intersections that they were seeing every day in their work. So, for example, a lot of women were coming into survivor support services for help with intimate partner violence, but they had also been victims of incest or other forms of violence in childhood. And so these discussions with our partners were the catalyst, really, for thinking about how we could work on both violence against women and violence against children, and ultimately to aim to end violence across generations and the links between the two. So the Kering Foundation, usually our normal grant making, is to support national and local organizations in 6 countries. So France, where we're based, Italy, Korea, Mexico, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And we focus on survivor support as well as prevention. So we're absolutely thrilled to have this new research program. It's a first for us, a new one for us, and we're very, very excited about it and to see what comes out of it. So our intention with this multi-year initiative, it's a 3-year initiative, is to strengthen evidence-based and locally led research to understand how violence against women and children intersects, and also to identify effective solutions through programs, services, and interventions. So it's really important to us also that kind of concrete element of, okay, so here's the research, but also how can we transform that into solutions. And with this program, we also wanted to encourage increased collaboration between lower middle income countries, where obviously SVRI focuses its work and where there's more need for research, and then institutions also in high income countries like McGill University, which is the partner of this research program too. So there'll be joint events, webinars, dissemination of findings across the 3-year partnership. And McGill, I think some more will be said about this later, but they'll be working on family violence, elevating the voices of children, caregivers, professionals in Canada and in France. And then SVRI will obviously be supporting early career researchers through doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships. That's why we're all here today, and we'll learn more about that through the webinar. So, you know, we're just so pleased to be here to meet some of you here today. And we just want to reiterate that our aim with this is that by investing in you, the next generation of researchers, and fostering global collaboration, we really hope that this research program will contribute to strengthening research, bridging the gap between research and programming, and ultimately, you know, as we all would like, contributing to a world in which women and children can live without violence and thrive. So thank you in advance to all of those of you thinking of applying. We really can't wait to see, you know, your ideas, what you're bringing to this important cause and what you're working on. And I'll hand back over to Sangeeta now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sorel, for sharing Kering Foundation's vision for this overall program. I would now like to ask Elizabeth Dartner, the Executive Director of SVRI, to introduce SVRI's vision for the Early Career Research Fellowships. Thanks so much, Liz, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta, and thank you, Sorel, for those opening remarks. We really appreciate this support. So through this partnership with the Kering Foundation, we are really excited to launch this new initiative, the Research Fellowships for Early Career Researchers working at the intersections of violence against women and violence against children. I just want to talk a little bit about our work. Just to sort of see how this work fits within this new offering. Our work is guided by 4 key pillars: building evidence through grant making, strengthening research capacity through online courses, providing bespoke support to our grant partners and conference workshops, fostering partnerships through SVRI Forum, which I'll talk just a little bit about, and really supporting the use of research in policy and practice by influencing change, because we want to get more and better resources to you researchers in the field doing the work. So put simply, our work is about making sure that evidence we support is useful, it's ethical, it's connected, and is really used to improve how violence against women and violence against children is prevented and responded to. And of course, as Sorel spoke about, with an unapologetic focus on low and middle income countries. So much of this work is about understanding how the different forms of violence show up together in people's lives, especially at the intersections of violence against women and violence against children. Because we know for a very long time, this work between violence against women and violence against children has largely moved forward in parallel, even though the links between them are very clear. And one of our roles at the SVRI is really to help bring these conversations together by supporting a shared research agenda, which my colleague Avni, whom Sangeeta will introduce, will be talking a little bit about, and backing new and locally led evidence and creating spaces where researchers, practitioners, policymakers can learn from one another and work across boundaries. So we no longer work in these silos. And one key example of it is the SVR Forum. And we would love you all to join at our next forum, which will be in Bangkok from the 5th of October this year. We've already invested significantly in this area with more than $2 million allocated to research on violence against women and violence against children, including grants that explicitly examine the intersections between these two forms of violence. But we also know that progress in this space depends on investment, particularly in researchers who are closest to the issues and the context they are working in, which Sorel spoke about. Because we know too often research about lower middle income countries is shaped from elsewhere. And we know that this limits the relevance and really overlooks local expertise. So supporting those researchers who are really in the places they study is essential if evidence is to truly reflect local realities, and we believe to be taken up in policy and practice in sustainable ways. And this is why these fellowships are so important to us. They are designed to support early career researchers based in low middle income countries, the future leaders of this field. Researchers working in their own countries, we know, bring deep local knowledge, fresh ideas, long-term commitment to their communities. Yet without the funding, mentorship, and opportunities to grow and to be part of a network, many of us struggle to remain in our own countries or even in the field at all. So we believe that these types of fellowships, where we are supporting rigorous policy-relevant research led by early career scholars, but supported by a network alongside funding, fellows will receive training, mentorship opportunities to publish, connect with peers, take on leadership roles. Our aim is to contribute to a really strong, more inclusive and more credible evidence base on violence against women and violence against children. Next slide, please, Paula. So Sorel spoke about our partners in this work, and I want to just take a little bit of time just to introduce them. So we're really excited to be working with Dr. Delphine Colin Vezina and her team at the Center for Research on Children and Families from McGill University, who are at the same time launching a complementary capacity strengthening program as part of this Kering supported initiative. And through this program, the team at McGill will also support doctoral students and postdoctoral fellows through hands-on research, and it will include working on systematic reviews of evidence and policy related to the prevention of family violence and child maltreatment, as well as taking part in international research initiatives at the centre, and centering the voices of children, caregivers, and professionals. And they'll particularly focus on children's rights, including in out of home care settings in Canada and France. And as Sarah has spoken about, we will be bringing these two groups together to share, cross-fertilize ideas through webinars, in-person events, and ongoing communication and developing a community of practice. And we hope that you will be part of this process, all of you in this room, as we move this work forward. But what really excites us about this work is its focus on the next generation, creating space, support, opportunity for new and emerging researchers to really shape where the field goes next. So thank you again. I'm going to hand back to you, Sangeeta, to introduce Avni. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing the overall vision for the broader fellowship program. I'm now delighted to welcome Dr. Avni Amin to talk about the intersections of research on violence against women and violence against children, which is the focus area for this research fellowship and the overall program. Avni works at the WHO's Department of Sexual and Reproductive Health and Research. She is the unit head for the Rights and Equality through the Life Course team and leads WHO's work on violence against women. Her primary focus has been to lead research on health sector interventions to address violence against women, support the development of normative guidelines and tools, and support countries in translation and uptake of the evidence and guidelines to strengthen health systems' response to violence against women. She has a PhD in international health from Johns Hopkins University and is originally from India and considers herself to be a global citizen. Welcome, Avni.
Thank you, and it's such a pleasure to be here. And maybe also just to add that to what Sangeeta said, so I actually sit in this department, which is uniquely synergized with the topic of today's webinar, which is it's a interagency a special program of research on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And one of our core mandates is not just on sexual and reproductive health and rights research, but also research capacity strengthening for researchers, particularly in low and middle income countries. So in many ways, it's a pleasure to be here and also to later on hear from all of you. A few years ago, SVRI, WHO, UNICEF, the Innocenti Center, and the Human Reproduction Program, or HRP, which is what is now known as the program that does research on sexual and reproductive health and rights. We got together and we commissioned a research agenda setting exercise to look at the intersections between violence against children and violence against women. Next slide, please. Right. So the methodology that was adopted is the well-known one in the field of research priority setting. It is called CHINRI, which stands for Child Health Nutrition Research Initiative Method. Nothing to do with child health, but it has actually been widely used for a whole range of health topics. And CHINRI is a method to really minimize the bias that comes from just considering the views of a few, voices in the room, and often the voices that speak the loudest. So CHINRI is a method that is basically considers views of multiple stakeholders, looks at judgments and views from these stakeholders as equal, so not just sort of listening to the loudest voice in the room. And it draws from the wisdom of the crowd through what we call crowdsourcing. And as I said, this is one of the ways it tries to dilute personal, individual agendas and biases. Next slide, please. So the advisory structures that were set up for this research priority setting, there was a coordinating group comprising of WHO and HRP, UNICEF's Innocenti Center, SVRI, and the Stellenbosch University. There was a advisory group consisting of 12 global experts that included both practitioners and researchers. And then there was a larger stakeholder group from whom inputs were solicited. So this comprised of 510 researchers, practitioners, funders, and policymakers. So the idea was to really listen to all different constituents who work on this issue. Next slide, please. So the steps that we followed in the research priority setting, we started with a systematic review that helped us define what are the domains that we wanted to ask questions around. And then the next step was to crowdsource and get list of a whole range of research questions. In that first step, we sort of got 463 questions, which were then whittled down after looking at areas, overlaps, etc., down to 45. The step 3 was really looking at the criteria for ranking and scoring these questions, these 45 questions. And the criteria that were used were both applicability and impact, as well as whether these questions would advance the evidence base and whether those questions were actually answerable or feasible to address within a reasonable period of time. The next step, which was step 4, was a survey question sent out to those 500, of which we had 153 respondents who did a scoring of these 45 questions. And then the next step, we actually had people analyze the ranks. And then we came up with some sort of scores for each of the questions. And then we selected the top, I think, 10 questions in the process. We did a validation workshop. And then this was followed by the publication of the research agenda in 2024, early 2024. And since then, we've been working, all of the agencies to disseminate the findings of this research agenda. Next step. Next slide, sorry. So the domains in which the questions were organized, the first was to really understand what we talk about when we say understanding the intersections of violence against women and children. The second one was looking at the research questions relevant to response and prevention programs. The third was around tools and methods for doing so. The fourth was around coordination and collaboration, including across the sectors. And the fifth was research questions that were relevant for driving policy change. So these were the domains in which the questions kind of fit, most frequently. Next slide, please. So the group was very mindful of making sure that the participation, was diverse. It included different subpopulations, and that it addressed issues around equity. So the methods that were adopted to ensure this, the first was that the advisory structures were used to reach out to their networks and act as ambassadors for this research agenda setting process, that we actively monitored the responses and responded to gaps. There were regular touch points with the advisory group and the field through webinars, online platforms, and communication outreach. And then we tried to make sure that the survey tools themselves were user-friendly and available in multiple languages. So the survey tools were available in Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. Next. So I'll just quickly go over the findings and focus on the top 10 research questions. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of the respondent characteristics, 82% were women. And, in a way, this kind of reflects also the fact that majority of people who work on these issues are often women. 44% were practitioners or service providers or program managers, and 41% were researchers. And then less than 2% were funders and policymakers each. 9% of the sample were self-identified LGBTQI populations, 14% identified as minoritized racial or ethnic groups. Sorry, I've got a lot of people popping up in my chat. I need to figure out a way to, okay. 10% were indigenous populations and 9% identified as people with disabilities. 59% of the sample primarily worked on both violence against children and violence against women, or worked on the intersections of the two. Next slide, please. So the top ranked questions based on the score, and we also have the domain in which these questions were belong to. The first question was around what are the essential elements of effective integrated programs to address both violence against women and violence against children. The second one was around effective parenting programs and how to adapt them to multiple contexts and multiple forms of violence against women and children. The third one was around innovative and valid measures for violence against women and violence against children that have been developed and tested in low resource settings via participatory approaches. How can we use the evidence on the intersections to develop a common language shared framework for improved coordination and collaboration? And then the fifth priority was around policies that address both violence against children and violence against women together. Next slide, please. So the sixth question was around the key barriers to effective collaboration across the violence against children and violence against women sectors. What are some of the main opportunities for driving forward a joint agenda? For example, investing in parenting as one of those issues. Then how do effective violence against women and violence against children prevention interventions achieve change? So really being in tune with the processes to achieve change. What are the forms of violence against children and violence against women that adolescents experience, including in the digital sphere? How are adolescent girls adequately addressed in policies that address violence against children, women, and their intersections? And how do we evaluate primary prevention interventions of violence against women and violence against children? So these are some of the top ranked. I know that there are more, but I think you can read a lot more in the detailed research agenda, and we can pop the link to this in the chat. Next slide. So just thinking about how these questions and the rankings differed by participant characteristics, we looked at whether there were differences by area of expertise, region of work, that is high income country versus low and middle income country settings, the type of work, that is whether there were differences between researchers, practitioners, donor funders, activists, and policymakers, and whether there were differences across groups, marginalized groups such as LGBTQI, racial and ethnic minorities, indigenous people, and people with disabilities. What the findings said that basically overall across these various groups, there were very minor differences. Those who worked on violence against children, but of course ranked parenting as their top priority, while those who worked on violence against children, women ranked it as a third priority. Overall, there was also agreement in these top priorities between high-income country setting participants and low and middle-income countries setting participants. But the low-middle-income country settings prioritized intervention research, whereas high-income countries also included policy. I think there were variations across marginalized groups, but I think there needs to be a bit more analysis and nuanced understanding of those differences. Next slide. I just wanted to share some I would say more personal reflections, because since the publication of the research agenda, there have been different evolutions, and I think one of the things in particular that I wanted to highlight is the importance of applying a life course perspective to addressing violence against children and violence against women In particular, we know that there are critical and sensitive periods in which interventions can actually achieve bigger impact. Some of these include early childhood, adolescence, and also for women, pregnancy. It provides an important entry point for addressing those intersections. I think we all know now, perhaps more so ever now than perhaps 2 or 3 years before, is the importance of the digital, social media, and AI, both its misuse and use, and how we can actually look at those intersections and the research agenda from that perspective. Another area that is also becoming very, very evident and links to some of the life force perspective is the mental health as something that we have to address of children, adolescents, and women exposed to violence. And we need to start thinking also about perpetration of violence against children and violence against women and some of the common drivers of perpetration of both forms or multiple forms of violence together. Next slide. And this is my last one. So I will just speak for WHO and the Human Reproduction Program in terms of how and where we want to take some of these priorities forward. I know SVRI has its own analysis and priorities, and maybe Liz and Sangeeta and others can come in. And of course, UNICEF, who's the other partner, also has its own priorities in taking this work and taking this research agenda forward. I think for us, as I said, mental health of children exposed to IPV or partner violence, the mental health of adolescents and pregnant women and mothers who are exposed to IPV, and really focusing on these, what I call critical and time-sensitive periods, and focusing on the research needs and evidence gaps in these periods is quite important. The other, and it speaks to the first research priority. The second one that we want to take forward is around research priorities 4 and 6, and looking at synergistic implementation of the clinical guidelines for violence against children and violence against women, as well as the synergistic rolling out of the Respect 2.0 and Inspire 2.0 packages for preventing violence against women and violence against children, and also beginning to unpack the role of perpetration on both forms of violence. The third area we want to take forward is research priority related to research priorities 3 and 8 around measurement, estimation work on violence against adolescent girls, including in the digital spaces. And with respect to research priority 9, which is around adolescent girls in particular, as well as 8, which is around adolescents and digital, we wanted to also look at unpacking how adolescents understand consent and sexuality, and how this is now being shaped increasingly in the online digital spaces, because we know that misogyny and the manosphere and the ways in which children are exposed to consent is really, really being shaped very differently in the online spaces. So these are some of the areas that we are hoping to take forward in the coming years. Over.
Thank you so much, Ravni.
And finally, just to say an acknowledgement, I won't read all the names, but as I said, this was truly one of the most amazing partnerships across all these agencies with wonderful, wonderful people that we worked with. And, we had so much inputs from a wide range of experts. So just to acknowledge everyone.
Thank you so much, Avni, for that super helpful overview of the research agenda. And we can come back to that if you have any questions during the Q&A session. I'm now going to briefly take over to talk a little bit about the fellowship program itself. Through the Early Career Fellowship, one of our core aims at SVRI is to generate stronger evidence on how violence against women and violence against children intersect, as Avni just sort of talked about in her presentation. And by building on this knowledge base and the work that's already been done in the research agenda and some of our other grants, we hope to better inform prevention strategy and policy responses. The fellowship program is also designed to empower early career researchers in low and middle income countries, where there are often quite few funding opportunities to free up students' time to focus on their research and professional development. Through this program, we hope to provide mentorship, training, and resources to help researchers grow into leaders who can drive localized research in their own context. We also want to ensure that this research is shared widely and fellows will receive support to publish their work and make sure their findings reach academic, policymaker, and practitioner audiences. And finally, the fellowship is about connection. We hope to support networks of researchers across regions and globally, creating communities of practice that can sustain collaboration and advocacy, which we need more than now at this particular time that we all find ourselves in. Next slide, please. So we are offering two fellowships. We're offering fellowships at both the doctoral and the postdoctoral level. There will be two awards available this year, two for doctoral candidates and two for postdoctoral researchers. Each fellowship can last up to 2 years, giving fellows hopefully sufficient time and stability to focus deeply on their research. Doctoral fellows will receive up to $17,000 per year, while postdoctoral fellows will receive up to $20,500 per year. This again depends on your budget and how you structured your research project. Next slide, please. For these fellowships, applicants must be nationals of a low or middle income country, and we provide a link in the chat for you to check your country's eligibility. This ensures that the fellowship directly supports scholars from regions that are most affected by the issues that we are addressing. Fellowship candidates should be enrolled full-time at an accredited in-person academic institution located in a low or middle-income country. We want to support fellows who are embedded in local communities, and that's why we're choosing to focus on students enrolled in institutions in low and middle-income countries. For postdoctoral candidates, I also want to note that you can propose an institution that you want to work with for your postdoctoral fellowship in case you're not already based at a university for your postdoc. But what we need to see from you is a letter of support committing to your appointment if you do get the fellowship. So hopefully that helps postdoc candidates who may be in a transitionary time in their career. And finally, most importantly, applicants must be undertaking either a PhD dissertation or postdoctoral research that specifically examines the intersections of violence against women and violence against children. This research focus is central to the fellowship's mission. And I hope Avni's presentation has also clarified several under-researched areas in this intersection for you. We will also, again, keep sharing the link to the shared research agenda on this topic so you can take a look to get a clearer idea on focus and areas that you could work on. Next slide, please. For doctoral fellowships, students should have a clear research proposal. We know that institutions differ, and it could be either that you have defended your dissertation proposal or that you have submitted and your committee has approved your dissertation proposal using another process. And this is because we want to support doctoral students who are in their final year of the PhD program, having completed any required coursework and are now completely focusing on their dissertation. This is why we're asking for a clear research proposal that has received approval in whatever mechanism is used in your institution. For postdoctoral researchers, we have a different eligibility criteria, and we require you to have received your PhD degree within the last 3 years of the application deadline, which is either on or after 31st January 2023, so between then and now. Next slide, please. We particularly encourage applicants who come from underrepresented regions or minoritized groups. And we're also looking for candidates who demonstrate a clear long-term commitment to advancing the rights and well-being of women and girls. This fellowship is not just about academic achievement, It's also about supporting researchers who are dedicated to working on the issues of violence against women and violence against children. And Preeti will soon talk about how we'll be able to assess that as well. Next slide, please. This also ties in with our review criteria for the fellowship. Reviewers will first look at how the proposed research contributes to the state of knowledge on the intersections between violence against women and violence against children. Strong applications will clearly articulate how their work fills gaps or advances understanding in this critical area, and fellows should have demonstrated a commitment to working on this issue in their short careers. The quality and rigor of the research design and the methodology of your proposed research project is also very important. Reviewers will assess whether the approach is appropriate, feasible, and capable of producing meaningful results within the time period that you have proposed for your research project. And given the sensitive nature of the topic, ethical considerations are very important. Applications must demonstrate careful attention to participant safety, confidentiality, and adherence to ethical research standards. Lastly, reviewers will also evaluate the proposed budget. It should be realistic, well justified, and aligned with the overall scope of the project. Next slide, please. And to be able to sort of use this review criteria, we have developed a four-step review process for the fellowships. SVRI staff will first review applications to ensure all eligibility criteria are met. We will then create a shortlist of candidates with input from external experts. Shortlisted candidates will then be invited to participate in a panel interview with external experts, including representatives from the Kering Foundation in early April. And we hope to announce our fellowship winners in May. So please stay tuned for that announcement. I will now hand over to SVRI's Director of Grants Management and Impact, Dr. Preeti Prabhughate, to talk about the application process in more detail. Thanks, Preeti, and over to you.
Thanks, Sangeeta. Next slide, please. And I'm going to talk to you about how to really create the application. Paula, could you, next slide. So this is a screenshot of a platform that SVRI uses to manage its grant applications. It's called Proposal Central. I have attached a screenshot for you to look at how it looks. We will provide all the links to you in the SVRI webpage as well as at the end of this presentation. But please note that we do not accept proposals that are submitted to us as an attachment on emails. We only accept those proposals that are submitted to Proposal Central. So you need to create a login on Proposal Central, and there are certain steps to follow for you to be able to complete the login. Next slide, please. So once, next slide, please. So once you have created a login, it will allow you, one slide behind, sorry. So all that I'm trying to highlight is you are able to complete your application in multiple languages. You can submit your application in English, Spanish, and French. Application template, we do not have an offline template, but what we do have is Proposal Central has a loaded template that you complete online. Here are the headings that you will see in the proposal template. For example, when you go to the online application and you've created your login, you will see that it will ask you to state your career objectives. What we're looking for under each heading, there is a description for each included on Proposal Central template with the character spaces limits that are mentioned. At the end of your application, we request you to upload the required documents that are listed here. So please have a look at those documents. We need a letter from your academic institution, and we need transcripts, and we need 2 reference letters, one of which needs to be from your academic supervisor. You can upload these as attachments to your applications. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are some useful links. You can see at the bottom, there is a submission queries pcsupport@altum.com. I'm particularly highlighting the proposal central links so that if you have a problem in creating your login, please write to the pcsupport@altum.com. They will very promptly help you with creating your login. Remember that the deadline is 31st January, 11:59 p.m. South Africa time. And we look forward to your applications. And thank you, Sangeeta. And I will hand back to you to facilitate the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Preeti, for that helpful overview. And please, everyone, do take a look at the different links that have been shared. We'll also share the presentation. The recording will be shared with everyone, so you can take a look and come back. And we have shared some helpful links in the chat as well. Please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to send us any questions that you have to any of our panelists. Sorry. And I'm just going to begin answering questions. So we have one question from Neha regarding postdoc eligibility criteria. Neha is asking, do we need to have a publication in the same domain to be able to apply? And our research consultancy is considered as well. So you don't need to have a publication in the same domain, but you should be able to sort of talk about your commitment to working on this issue at the intersection of violence against women and violence against children, or your research experience in either of these areas when you're talking about your commitment to this issue. And you don't need to have had extensive experience in working on this issue. So you don't need to have a publication, but some research experience is helpful, but not necessary. For postdoc applications, unfortunately, we do have a 3-year limit. So you should have received your PhD within the last 3 years to be eligible for your postdoc, for the postdoc fellowship. We have another question from Doreen. Doreen, it's hard to answer questions about your topics without knowing much more about the scope of your research project. So we urge you to take a look at the shared research agenda on violence against women and violence against children and see if your research fits in at the intersections. And if it does, please do definitely apply for this fellowship application. Ben, thank you so much for your question. Unfortunately, we do have a 3-year limit for our postdoc application. So I'm sorry about that. And this is just because we would like to have researchers who are at least currently still involved in research projects to be able to complete their research projects within the duration of the fellowships, which is quite short, which is 2 years. So we will need fellows who have already conceptualized a project and are ready to start working on it. Please do ask us any other questions in using the Q&A function, even if you have any questions for me with regard to the research agenda on violence against women and violence against children. We have a question from Vinile, who is asking about the 2-year criteria for transcripts. And yes, you do need to submit transcripts for the last 2 years for your PhD. If you've only been enrolled in your PhD for the past 1 year, that's also fine, but please do send us a transcript so that we can see that you are currently enrolled in a PhD program. Chinonso has asked if postdoc applicants need to be affiliated to an academic institution. You do need a letter of support from an academic institution. So even if you're not currently working at an institution where you would like to be affiliated to your postdoc, if you have identified a potential academic institution, if they can give you a letter of support to say that they would support your application and appointment, if you get the postdoc fellowship, that should be sufficient for your application. So please do identify an academic institution and consider applying for the fellowship. Abigail has a good question. Do you accept researchers who have completed their master's and are about to start their PhD? We are looking to support PhD students who are more advanced and are in their final stages of their PhD program, where they already have developed a research project and are now proceeding to data collection or doing secondary data analysis, because the fellowship duration is very short. It's just 2 years. And so that's why we're focusing on more advanced stage PhD students. So please do apply in the next 2 coming years when we'll have this opportunity open again. For both the PhD and the postdoc fellowships, we are looking at research projects that focus on the intersections between violence against women and violence against children. So that is definitely the focus area that we'd like you to conceptualize your projects in. Sonam has a question asking, any consideration for an abstract submitted by candidates who are not registered for any PhD program in any university or institution? Again, we're only looking to support PhD students who are in their final years of the PhD program because the fellowship is for such a short duration for 2 years. So unfortunately, we're only PhD students who have an approved dissertation proposal would be eligible for this fellowship opportunity. And unfortunately, I can see the questions from Shanida and others about being interested in working on the intersections, but not being currently enrolled in a PhD program. We completely understand that there's a lot of interest in working at the intersections, and there's a lot of need for financial support. But unfortunately, at this moment, we're looking to support early career researchers who have an ongoing research project, who have conceptualized a research project. And we definitely take your feedback into consideration when thinking about future funding opportunities from SVRI. We also have our large grants, and Preeti can share a link about this in the chat. So there are some other funding opportunities at SVRI that you could definitely apply to without being affiliated to a university or being enrolled in a PhD or a postdoctoral fellowship. Chinonso has a question. Can postdoc applicants use an institutional support letter from a research institution, or must it be an academic institution or a university? You can definitely send us an institutional support letter from a research institute, as long as it's an accredited research institute. So that should be fine. I understand that for some postdoctoral students, they work with research institutes. And please do email us regarding this as well. Nikita has a question about eligibility. And this is quite a common question that we've been getting in terms of queries about the fellowship program from students who are nationals of low and middle income countries, but then are now registered for their PhD or enrolled at universities in high income countries, and who unfortunately are not eligible. You're only eligible for the fellowship, for the PhD and the postdoctoral fellowship if you are a national of a low and middle income country and are currently also pursuing your PhD or your postdoc at an institution that is located in a low and middle income country. Ashwarya had a good question. will I still be considered for the fellowship if my PhD focuses on violence against children and the intersection of violence against women and violence against children is just a section in my research? This is a little hard to answer live, especially without knowing the whole focus of your research project. But we would like the intersection of violence against women and violence against children to be the focus of your research and not just a small subsection. So please do still send in an application and we can take a look to see how eligible your project is. Again, we have some other questions regarding this as well. I understand that a lot of you may have research projects that are either focusing on violence against women or are focusing on violence against children. And I understand that that you might have chosen to focus on one of the two topics, and both are really important. But for this fellowship opportunity, we are looking at research that is focused on the intersections. And we will be sharing we'll share the link for the research agenda again, and I urge you to take a look at the research agenda. There are several under-researched areas and gaps at the intersections that you could work on for your research projects. Preeti, do step in and read out any questions if I'm missing any, because there are so many coming in.
So, Sangeeta, there has been a question being asked whether the fellowship will be received through the university or directly with to the candidates. So, I think the answer to that is that the fellowship money will directly go to the candidates, but we need you to have a very explicit formal affiliation with the university, because your guide also will be a part of the program and who is helping you to build your capacity to conduct the research. So I think that answers it very clearly, that the money will go to the fellow, not to the university.
Thanks, Preeti. And also at the end of your fellowship, you will have to prepare a report where you would have to sort of explain, tell us briefly about how the funds for the fellowship were sort of used and what the outcome of your research project was. And hopefully your research advisor can also support you in that. We have another question from Chinonso, who's asking that the application document requires transcripts. And does this apply to postdoc applicants? And they're asking because some PhD programs are research-based and there are no transcripts available. So I completely understand that there are PhD programs where there are no transcripts available, and the format of transcripts might be different in different countries. But then in your institution, if you did your PhD from a university, there will be some format that's quite similar to a transcript. And most universities today do provide transcripts. So I would definitely encourage you to check with your institution to see what format that's similar to a transcript that they can provide to show us, to give us proof that you have completed a PhD program and you underwent some amount of coursework.
Then there is a question on whether eligibility for those living in refugee areas and all. So I really request people to go through the eligibility criteria. The eligibility criteria is you being a student or you pursuing your postdoctoral fellowship, postdoctoral research in universities that are based in low middle income countries, and whether that particular university is in a conflict ridden country. That does not exclude you from your opportunity to apply to the fellowship. There was also some question I read about, could we collaborate with a women's organization? And I think the thing to really understand the eligibility is that the fellowship is to build capacity of early career researchers, correct? So what is important is that you are doing your, say, doctoral or postdoctoral research And the fellowship will pay for that. But if you want to collaborate with any other organizations on your own for data collection or whatever, it will be looked at purely based on the eligibility criteria that Sangeeta outlined in her slides. Correct? But understand that the fellowship only pays for the fellow and their research and their capacity building. If you want to do research in collaboration with other NGOs or other women's organizations, it's a great idea. But for that, SVRI has a different grant making mechanism. It's our annual call for request for proposals. I have included a link in the chat for you to look at also.
Thanks, Preeti. And there's a good question from Doreen. For the postdoc, is the funding only for research or also covers the salary, or is the expectation that the postdoc is already on salary by their institution? No, you can definitely include a budget line for salary for yourself for the duration of the postdoc fellowship. We do ask you that you look at salary scales for postdocs within your institution and make sure that they're aligned with fellowship amounts or sort of stipends prevalent in your institution and your country for the salary. So please definitely do add in a line for that. Idris has asked a question. Are you only focusing on research on violence against women and children? Or is there anything that has to do with psychological support? I again request you to take a look at the shared research agenda on violence against women and violence against children. You can definitely look at the role of psychological support in relation to both these issues and how they intersect as well. We would welcome you to have a research project focused on that area. And your research project, your data collection can take place in any part of the world as long as you are located in a low and middle income country. And we're hoping that you would be wanting to do research within your local country context. So, Mohammed, if you are living in Cox's Bazar and you would like to do a research project there, that would definitely work. Neha, thank you so much about your feedback about postdoctoral grants and the issue with limiting postdocs for 3 years. We definitely agree that this is an issue, and I know that getting research funding is quite challenging in the current environment. But because our fellowship durations are so short for just 2 years, we are looking to support fellows who have been recently engaged in research and can complete their project within that timeline, and we'll definitely take your feedback into consideration when reviewing our application sort of eligibility criteria going forward. We have a question about. Yeah, go ahead, Preeti.
No. I think you already began answering.
Asking about the need to be registered with an institution or whether a letter of support for the institution is sufficient. It's hard to answer your question without knowing if you are looking to apply for the PhD or the postdoc fellowship. If it's the postdoc fellowship, then a letter of support from an institution who's agreeing to support you if you get the postdoc fellowship is sufficient. But if you are applying for a PhD fellowship, you definitely need to be registered with the university where you're getting your PhD. You need to show us a letter attesting to that. So that is definitely necessary. So for postdoc, you can definitely you will definitely need a letter of support from an institution who can support you if you do get the postdoc fellowship. And Doreen and others, yes, your budget needs to be within the total amount for the fellowship. So for postdoc, the total value of the fellowship per year is up to 20,500. So your salary definitely has to be within that range. And we hope that you also are thinking about research costs, because we, whether that's for primary data collection or accessing secondary data, because we're keen. And there are some other criteria for budgets. If you take a look at the RFP, we also would like you to budget visits to another university where there potentially is a researcher whom you would like to collaborate with. So I encourage you to take a look at the RFP and the application guidelines to know more about the budget. And I realize that we are over time. So thank you, everyone, for your questions. That's been, I hope this webinar has been helpful. I know it's been quite long. And please feel free to email us at svri@svri.org if you have any questions about the fellowship opportunity. And thank you so much to all our panelists for being here and giving us your valuable time to be with us right now. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.